George's office sat high above downtown Jackson, Mississippi, the kind of place polished executives used to feel untouchable. But that illusion cracked the moment a heavy envelope hit his desk with a dull thud. He glanced up. A courier stood in the doorway, expression unreadable, as he said, "Sign here, sir." George scribbled his name, barely looking, assuming it was another contract. Across the room, Chloe lounged in his leather chair, crossing one leg over the other with a smile she wore like perfume, bold and confident. "You finally getting that client paperwork?" she teased, brushing a strand of hair behind her shoulder. "Good. We need to celebrate later." George forced a distracted nod and tore open the envelope. He expected business. He expected numbers. He expected control. He did not expect this. The moment he pulled out the first sheet, his breath caught. His eyes scanned the page once, twice, refusing to accept what he was seeing. Rebecca Whitman versus George Whitman. Petition for divorce. The words slammed into him harder than any punch. His fingers went numb. His throat tightened. His vision blurred at the edges. His wife, 7 months pregnant with his twins, had filed for divorce. Before he could speak, the second page slipped from his trembling hand and fluttered toward Chloe. Curious, she picked it up, expecting business jargon. Her smirk vanished. She read aloud slowly, each word slicing the air open. "I know about the affair." George felt the room tilt. His chair scraped loudly as he stood too fast, gripping the desk for balance. The blood drained from his face as Chloe looked up at him, stunned. "George, she knows," she whispered. The truth he had buried, denied, justified, and ignored. Rebecca knew everything. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She wasn't questioning. She was done. A wave of panic tore through him, sharp and immediate. His chest tightened. He could barely breathe as he flipped through the rest of the documents with shaking hands. Her signature was everywhere. Her handwriting. Her finality. "Rebecca," he whispered, as if saying her name might reverse the moment. "No, no, she can't." Chloe stepped forward cautiously. "George, wait." But he didn't hear her. All he could hear was the sound of his life collapsing in on itself. His marriage, his family, his future, gone. Before George could gather himself, the weight of the moment pressed down like a judgment he had spent months pretending would never come. His hands shook over the divorce papers. Chloe backed away. Silence thickened in the room. And this exact second, is where you, the viewer, must pause and ask yourself something. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that the thought of losing them felt impossible, until one day the truth hit you without warning? Have you ever loved someone who slowly shifted into a stranger, someone you couldn't recognize anymore? Or maybe you've been in Rebecca's position, watching the person you built a life with drift toward choices that cut deeper than words ever could. Or perhaps you've been like George, convinced you had more time to fix things. These questions are uncomfortable. They force us to confront moments we avoid remembering, moments where trust is shattered, where hearts break quietly in bedrooms or offices or late-night arguments. But they're real, because no matter who you are, no matter where you're watching from, one truth connects us all. Everyone knows what it feels like to question someone's loyalty or to question their own choices. That tension, that fear, that moment of what do I do now is exactly where this story grips you. Rebecca reached that point long before George realized she had stopped waiting for him to change. And now, with one envelope, her silence spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. As George stood frozen, gripping the edge of his desk, the true weight of his actions crashed over him. This wasn't just about an affair. This wasn't just about lies. This wasn't even about Chloe, who now hovered near the bookcase, unsure whether to comfort him or distance herself. This moment exposed the fracture that had been widening for months. Rebecca was 7 months pregnant, carrying their twins, children she had prayed for, children she protected fiercely even while her heart quietly cracked. And while she was preparing for motherhood, attending appointments alone, sleeping beside an empty pillow most nights, George was with someone else. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he would fix things later. He told himself Rebecca would never know. But she did. And she didn't confront him with screaming or tears. She didn't plead, didn't argue, didn't accuse. She simply left. Just a stack of papers that told him everything. She wasn't going to fight for his attention anymore. She wasn't going to wait for change that never came. She was gone. He had no idea where she was, no idea who was helping her, no idea how long she'd known the truth. And the most devastating part? The babies weren't safe anymore, not because of her choices, but because of the stress that had been building for weeks. Rebecca's doctor had warned her about tension, about her rising blood pressure, about the danger of emotional strain during pregnancy. George didn't know that. He didn't know how fragile the situation had become. But he was about to find out, because the life he thought he had time to repair was already slipping out of his hands. George sank into his chair, the papers still trembling in his hands. His mind raced, desperate to make sense of it all. But the truth was simple. Rebecca didn't leave because of one mistake. She left because she had finally reached her limit. And this is where your mind begins to search for answers. Because a question rises that every viewer has asked at least once in their life. What finally pushes someone to walk away from the person they once loved beyond measure? Is it the lies, the loneliness, the disappointment that builds piece by piece? Or is it the moment they realize their heart deserves peace more than chaos? And here's another question. How does a marriage held together by years of love and shared memories collapse, yet still somehow hold a path toward redemption? This story isn't just about betrayal. It isn't just about heartbreak. It's about choices, the ones we make, the ones we avoid, and the ones that change everything in a single moment. So stay with me through this journey, because what happens next isn't predictable, and it isn't easy. It's a road filled with consequences, revelation, and courage. And the twist, the one you'll meet later, will challenge everything you assumed about love, loyalty, and second chances. Hold on, because before we even begin the full story, the second shock is already waiting on the other side of this moment. The divorce papers were still scattered across George's desk when his phone buzzed violently. But the buzzing didn't stop. Finally, he snatched it up with trembling hands. He answered, "Nia, what's—" Her voice exploded through the line, tight and urgent. "George, get to St. Mary's Hospital now." His entire body locked. "Is Rebecca—" She collapsed. "The twins—" Her voice broke. "Just hurry." The call ended as George leapt from his chair, knocking papers, pens, and even Chloe's purse off the table. He didn't care. He didn't look back. He ran out of the office with his heart slamming against his ribs, down the elevator, across the lobby, through traffic lights he barely saw, breath ragged, vision shaking, mind racing with one thought: please don't let me be too late. He burst into the hospital, shouting Rebecca's name, chest heaving, sweat rolling down his temples. A nurse rushed toward him. "Sir, you need to wait. Where is my wife? Where is Rebecca? Where are my babies?" His voice cracked open. Doctors in scrubs hurried a gurney down the hallway at full speed. Rebecca lay on it, unconscious, pale, her hair damp with sweat, wires strapped to her, monitors beeping erratically. George stumbled forward, reaching out instinctively. "Rebecca! Rebecca, I'm here, please." A doctor blocked him with one arm. "Sir, you can't go in there. What's happening? Please tell me what's happening." The doctor tightened his jaw, speaking fast while moving. "We're losing the heartbeat of baby B. We have to move now." The words slammed into George like a blow. "No, wait." But Rebecca disappeared behind the closing doors. The lock clicked. The hallway fell silent. George stood frozen, breath gone, strength gone. Everything he had been afraid to face, everything he thought he had time to fix, everything he had taken for granted, was suddenly being pulled away from him on the other side of those doors. A single line echoes, "We're losing the heartbeat of baby B." Welcome to Mr. Graham's Stories, where we share meaningful life lessons through powerful storytelling. If you're new here, we're truly glad you've joined us. If you've been following the channel for a while, welcome back. Thank you for being part of this journey. Before we continue, please take a moment to like this video. Your engagement helps more people discover our stories, and it supports the work we put into each one. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. We love seeing our community check in from around the world. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss any of our future stories. Now, let's go deeper into a tale that shows how choices, consequences, and second chances can shape the course of a family's future. Rebecca lay awake in the dim glow of the bedroom lamp, staring at the digital clock as it shifted from 11:46 p.m. to 11:47 p.m. Every passing minute strengthened the knot in her chest. The house was silent, too silent for a home that once carried laughter, late-night conversations, and the soft rhythm of two people growing together. Tonight, only she and the twins seemed awake. Inside her belly, Austin shifted gently, followed by a light kick from Savannah. Their movements comforted her, but they also reminded her of everything missing. George should have been home hours ago. She glanced at her phone again. The last message from him sat at the top of the screen. "Working late, don't wait up." No warmth, no familiar teasing, just a blunt message typed with the detachment of a stranger. Rebecca swallowed hard. A year ago, George would call, not text. He'd ask about her day, send a voice note just to hear her laugh, or assure her he'd try to make it home in time to rub her feet after long pregnancy appointments. He wasn't perfect, but he had always made her feel safe, wanted, seen. Now everything felt cold. She placed a hand over her stomach and whispered, "It's all right, little ones. Mommy's here." Her voice wavered despite her attempt to stay steady. The house's emptiness pressed in on her, the kind that doesn't come from silence but from absence. She walked slowly toward the window, steadying herself against the dresser. 7 months pregnant meant even simple movements required effort, but pacing was easier than lying still with her thoughts. Outside, the quiet Jackson neighborhood slept under streetlights casting soft halos across the pavement. She watched every car that passed, hoping foolishly for headlights pulling into their driveway. But each time, the car kept driving. Something was wrong. That truth pulsed inside her stronger than the twins' kicks. Rebecca wasn't naive. She had sensed the shift for weeks. George working later, guarding his phone more carefully, smelling faintly of a floral scent she didn't wear, offering excuses that didn't match his habits. Still, she tried to give him the benefit of doubt, blaming pregnancy hormones or workplace stress. But tonight, even she couldn't lie to herself. The man she married felt miles away, even when he stood in the same room. She rubbed her thumb across the wedding ring still resting on her finger. The diamond glinted as if clinging to memories she didn't want to revisit but couldn't help recalling. Her heart tugged her backward in time. 6 years earlier, the Mississippi heat had been unforgiving. Rebecca, freshly graduated, ducked into a downtown cafe to escape the sun while waiting for a job interview. She was nervous, reviewing her resume when a shadow fell across her table. A tall man with striking blue eyes smiled down at her, holding her nearly melted iced tea. "You look like you could use a refill," he joked. She blinked in surprise. "Thank you. George, right? From the entrepreneur panel last month?" His eyebrows rose with amused shock. "You remember me? Now I'm at a disadvantage because I don't know your name yet." One conversation turned into an hour turned into dinner turned into something unforgettable. Rebecca remembered how he used to stare at her like she carried all the joy in the world, how he drove 4 hours to surprise her on her birthday, how he stood proudly beside her at family cookouts, unbothered by the curious stares their interracial relationship attracted. He used to hold her hand tighter whenever people whispered. He used to sing old R&B in the car just to make her laugh. He used to kiss her forehead like she was his piece. That George felt like a memory now, one slipping through her fingers. A sharp ache formed in her chest, pulling her back to the dim bedroom and the lonely glow of the lamp. She took a long, steadying breath. She needed to talk to someone who understood her, who loved her enough to tell her the truth even when it hurt. She grabbed her phone and scrolled to the contact she always relied on, Nia. Her thumb hovered for a moment. What if she was overthinking? What if she looked foolish? What if George really was just tired and overwhelmed? But her gut refused to be silenced. She typed, "You up? I need to talk." It took less than 5 seconds for the typing dots to appear. "Always up for you, Bex. What's wrong?" That simple message unlocked the tears she had been holding back. She blinked them away, trying to steady her breathing before hitting call. Nia picked up immediately. "Hey, what's going on?" Even over the phone, her tone carried warmth and concern. Rebecca swallowed hard. I don't know anymore." She sank onto the edge of the bed. "George has been distant. He's late again. He barely looks at me, Nia. I feel like I'm losing him." Nia didn't speak right away. When she did, her voice was calm, steady, exactly what Rebecca needed. "Start from the beginning, Bex." Rebecca explained everything she'd noticed. The late nights, the new scent on his shirts, the guarded phone, the disconnect in his voice. Every detail made her chest tighten a little more, because saying it out loud made the truth harder to avoid. When she finished, Nia sighed, a sound filled with both empathy and worry. "Rebecca, trust your instincts. You don't jump to conclusions. If you're feeling this, something's off." Rebecca wiped a tear from her cheek. "I don't want to believe it. Not with the twins coming. Not after everything we've been through." "I know," Nia whispered, "but you're not imagining things, and you're not alone." Rebecca closed her eyes, letting her friend's words ground her. She placed a hand over her belly again. I need to know what's really happening." "And you will," Nia assured her, "one step at a time." Rebecca nodded even though Nia couldn't see her. Tonight was the first time she allowed herself to consider the truth, not the truth she feared, but the truth she needed. Something was breaking, something she tried desperately to hold together, something George didn't seem interested in saving. She didn't have answers yet, but she knew this. Tomorrow would not be the same. The next morning arrived with a dull heaviness that settled over Rebecca like a storm cloud refusing to move on. She hadn't slept more than an hour. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind replayed the same questions in loops she couldn't escape. Why was George so distant? Why did he feel so far away when she needed him the most? Why did her heart feel like it had already braced for bad news? By 9 a.m., the house was quiet except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the faint movement of the twins beneath her ribs. Rebecca sat in the kitchen with a lukewarm cup of tea she wasn't drinking, staring blankly at the counter. She didn't want to suspect her husband. She didn't want to become the woman who snooped or doubted or searched for evidence. But she also didn't want to live in denial. Her phone buzzed with a message from Nia. "Checking on you. How are you feeling this morning?" Rebecca typed a short reply, still thinking. It was the only thing she could say, because today she needed answers, and there was only one place she knew to find them. Slowly she made her way down the hallway to George's home office. The door creaked open easily. He never bothered locking it. He had nothing to hide in here, at least not in contrast to whatever else he was hiding. She paused at the threshold, hand resting gently on her belly as Austin shifted. "I'm sorry, little ones," she whispered. "Mommy's not trying to stress you, but we need the truth." The laptop sat on the desk, closed, silent, harmless looking, but it felt like standing before a doorway to the truth she wasn't sure she wanted. Rebecca sat down, opened the laptop, and the screen lit up. The password screen appeared. She hesitated. She remembered it. He'd shared it years ago when trust wasn't in question, when they helped each other with schedules, bills, travel plans, when he saw no need to hide anything. Her fingers trembled as she typed a familiar password. The computer unlocked. Her heart dropped. She double-clicked the email icon, and the inbox opened. Hundreds of messages loading one after another. She scanned through the usual ones, business, meetings, project proposals, until a particular name caught her eye. Chloe. It stood out like a bright mark on clean paper. Rebecca clicked the first one. A message time-stamped nearly midnight. Her breath caught. Dinner was amazing, and last night was even better. "I miss you already. When will she be out of the house again?" "Yours, C." Rebecca covered her mouth with both hands as a sharp pain stabbed her chest. Her pulse pounded. Her vision blurred at the edges. No, 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 no. Her hands shook violently as she clicked the next email. There were dozens. Little notes, inside jokes. "Can't wait to see you, miss your touch. You're worth the risk." Her throat tightened until she couldn't swallow. Her stomach churned so sharply she thought she might be sick. She pushed back from the desk too fast and had to grip the edge to steady herself. Tears stung her eyes. Hot, immediate, uncontrolled. She forced herself to click on the reply thread, needing, despite the pain, to see everything. George's response. "I'll arrange something soon. These late nights are raising suspicion, but don't worry, I'll handle it." Handle it? Her body trembled. She was his wife, carrying his children, loving him long after he stopped choosing her. A sob escaped her, breaking through the silence. She cupped her hand over her mouth, but the cry slipped out anyway, sharp and wounded. She closed the laptop with a shaking hand and pressed both palms to her face. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. Her heart felt like it had cracked straight down the center. Of all the outcomes she feared, having confirmation this cold, this undeniable, it was far worse than any suspicion she'd ever entertained. After several minutes, or maybe longer, she couldn't tell, Rebecca pushed herself upright. Her tears had slowed, though her breathing was still unsteady. Her eyes felt raw, her cheeks damp. The betrayal hit again and again in waves, like standing in the tide while the water rose relentlessly. She reached for her phone. Her first instinct was to call Nia, but she stopped herself. Not yet. She needed a plan first. Not a reaction, not another tearful confession. A plan, because now she knew the truth, undeniable and devastating, and she had to think not just for herself but for the two tiny lives relying on her. Rebecca wiped her face with trembling hands. This house was no longer safe for her heart. This marriage as it stood was no longer a home. She stepped out of the office and leaned heavily against the wall, breathing deeply to calm herself and the babies. "I will not let this break me," she whispered. The words were fragile, but they were hers. She moved through the house slowly, picking up essentials without fully processing her motions. A small suitcase, the twins' ultrasound pictures from the fridge, a few maternity clothes, her prenatal vitamins, her medical documents. Every item she packed felt like a goodbye. Once her bag was filled, she paused in the doorway of the nursery. The soft yellow walls, the tiny crib George built, the plush toys arranged neatly on the shelf. Tears welled in her eyes again. "This was supposed to be our future," she murmured, but she couldn't stay for memories. She needed to protect herself and her babies from more pain. She zipped the suitcase and grabbed her phone. This time she texted Nia, "I'm coming over. Please don't ask questions yet." The reply came instantly. "Doors open. I'm here." Rebecca took one last look around the home she had built with love, the home she thought would see birthdays, holidays, family dinners, first steps. Then she turned off the lights, walked out, locked the door behind her, and drove away from the life she once believed would last forever. The morning unfolded like any other in George's office, but a quiet tension hung in the air, a weight he didn't acknowledge, yet couldn't escape. He sat behind his massive desk, scrolling through emails with forced focus. Ever since Rebecca stopped engaging in their short, empty exchanges at home, he sensed something was off. She wasn't nagging, wasn't questioning, wasn't searching his face for clues anymore. She was just calm, too calm. He convinced himself it was because she was tired from the pregnancy. But a small part of him, a part he pushed aside far too often, whispered something he didn't want to admit. She knows. Still, he brushed off the unease and straightened his tie, telling himself he'd figure out what to say to her later. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, maybe after the babies arrived. He always found a way to delay the hard conversations. His phone buzzed with a message from Chloe. "Lunch today? I'm craving that sushi spot you like." He sighed and typed back, "We'll see. Busy morning." Before he could send it, a soft knock came from outside his office. His assistant's voice followed. "Mr. Whitman, a courier is here. Says it's urgent." George frowned. "Send him in." The door opened, and a uniformed courier stepped in, holding a thick envelope with both hands. His expression was blank, professional. Delivery for George Whitman. Signature required. George signed without thinking twice. He assumed it was a contract, maybe a revised deal, maybe financial documents from the board. The courier placed the envelope on the desk, nodded once, and left without another word. Behind him, Chloe's heels clicked as she entered the room, smiling like she owned the air between them. She wore a fitted beige dress and confidence like perfume. "You look tense," she teased, sliding onto the edge of his desk. "Hopefully that's good news for us." George exhaled in mild annoyance. "It's probably paperwork. Nothing exciting." Chloe tapped the envelope lightly. "Open it. You never know." He glanced at it again. It was plain, no branding, his name handwritten neatly across the front. Something felt odd. He slid a finger under the flap and pulled the envelope open. As the papers spilled into his hands, his eyes landed on the first page. His world stopped. Rebecca's handwriting was unmistakable. A cold wave washed through him. He blinked, trying to make sense of the title at the top of the document. Dissolution of marriage. Rebecca Whitman versus George Whitman. His breath hitched. "What is it?" Chloe asked, snatching the top page before he could react. She began reading aloud, still smirking, until she reached the fourth line. Her voice sharpened. "By the time this reaches you, I've already left the house. The enclosed documents are our divorce papers. I have filed them with the court." Chloe's eyebrows shot up. Her voice grew quieter, almost stunned. "I know about the affair." George felt a bolt of panic tear through his chest. "No, no, no," he whispered, shaking his head, flipping through the pages with trembling fingers. His eyes scanned rapidly, as if hoping the words might magically change. But they didn't. Rebecca knew, and she was gone. The letter continued, her voice painfully composed in writing. "You've made your choices. Now I'm making mine. Do not contact me unless it concerns our children or goes through my attorney." George's stomach twisted violently. He pressed his hand to his forehead, breath shallow. The edges of his vision wavered. Chloe stood frozen, holding the letter at arm's length like it was burning her fingers. "Well, that escalated," she muttered under her breath. "Stop," he snapped, snatching the letter from her. "Don't talk. What? You knew this might happen. She's pregnant and emotional." "Chloe," his voice cracked sharply. "Stop." He looked back at the letter, scanning Rebecca's signature at the bottom, the loops and curves he had traced once upon a time with affection. Now it felt like a death sentence. His hand shook as he grabbed his phone and dialed Rebecca's number, straight to voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail. A third time. "Her phone is off," he whispered. He stood abruptly, knocking over a stack of documents as he paced the office in frantic circles. His assistant glanced through the frosted glass wall, startled by the sudden commotion. Chloe watched him with a mix of irritation and disbelief. "I don't know why you're surprised," she said, crossing her arms. "This was inevitable. You told me you wanted to be with me. She's just making it official." George froze, then slowly turned to her. "Do you even hear yourself?" he asked in disbelief. "Rebecca is 7 months pregnant. She's carrying my children." Chloe scoffed lightly. "And she'll be fine. You two weren't happy. You said that—" "I said a lot of things," he muttered, his voice low, guilt-ridden. "But I never wanted this." He grabbed the divorce papers again, flipping to the back pages where her attorney's contact information was listed. The reality settled heavily in his bones. Rebecca wasn't bluffing. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She wasn't arguing. She was done. Truly done. A sickening weight filled his chest as he asked, almost to himself, "Where did she go?" Chloe shrugged. "Probably to her friend's place. What does it matter? You'll negotiate. Lawyers will handle it." Her tone, dry, careless, pierced something deep in him. "Get out," he said quietly. She blinked. "What?" "I said get out," he repeated, louder this time. "Leave." Chloe straightened, taken aback by his sudden firmness. "George, you're not thinking—" Now, Chloe, the finality in his voice left no room for argument. Her heels clicked sharply as she stormed toward the door. Fine. Handle your drama. But don't come crying to me when this blows up in your face. She slammed the door behind her. Silence smothered the office. George ran both hands through his hair and sank onto the couch, clutching the papers like they were a lifeline slipping through his fingers. The calm before the storm was the storm. He tried calling again. Voicemail. He pulled up their home security app offline. He pulled up her location sharing disabled. His chest tightened painfully. She's really gone, he whispered. For the first time since this entire mess began, George felt fear grip him with full force. Not fear of losing money, not fear of public embarrassment, but fear of losing the only woman who ever loved him without condition. Fear of losing the family he never realized he was destroying until now. He dropped his head into his hands as the divorce papers slipped onto the floor beside him. Everything he had taken for granted, everything he believed was guaranteed, everything he assumed would always wait for him, was gone. The collapse of his marriage had officially begun. The morning Rebecca left her home, the sky over Jackson was a dull gray, heavy with humidity and the faint promise of rain. She stood in the hallway of the house she once cherished, her suitcase resting beside her swollen ankles. The silence inside the home was different now, not peaceful but hollow, stripped of warmth. It felt like the walls themselves knew she would not return. She placed a hand on her belly, whispering softly as the twins shifted inside her. "We're leaving now," she murmured. "We'll be safe." Every step toward the front door felt like walking through mud, each one pulled back by memories she didn't want to revisit. She glanced toward the living room, catching sight of the framed ultrasound picture on the mantel, the one she had placed there the day she surprised George with the news of their twins. Her throat tightened. She didn't take it with her. Leaving it felt symbolic, like leaving behind the version of herself who believed he would always put their family first. A car horn sounded outside. Rebecca inhaled slowly, forced her trembling hands to grip the suitcase handle and stepped out, closing the door gently behind her. It wasn't slammed, it wasn't dramatic, just a quiet, final closing, the way a chapter shuts when a person has nothing left to fight for inside it. Nia got out of the driver's seat and jogged up the walkway, her expression turning soft when she saw the tears threatening to spill from Rebecca's eyes. "You ready?" Nia asked, voice low and steady. Rebecca nodded, though her body felt weak. Nia took the suitcase from her, loaded it into the trunk, and helped her into the passenger seat. As the car pulled away from the curb, Rebecca pressed a hand against the window, watching her home fade from view. She expected to feel relief, but all she felt was grief, a deep, aching grief not just for the betrayal, but for the life she believed they were building together. The ride to Nia's townhouse was quiet. Rebecca stared out the window, the passing streets blurring as her mind spiraled through the events of the night before. She hadn't slept. Her body was exhausted, but her thoughts wouldn't let her rest. She kept seeing Chloe's name in those emails, kept hearing George's promises in her memory, kept feeling the moment her heart broke beyond repair. When they reached Nia's driveway, Nia immediately circled around and opened Rebecca's door. "Come on," she said gently, offering her hand. Inside the townhouse, the warm smell of vanilla candles welcomed them. The lights were soft, the living room neat, and the atmosphere felt safe, something Rebecca hadn't felt in weeks. As soon as she sat on the couch, her composure fractured. Tears spilled down her cheeks, unstoppable now. Nia quickly sat beside her, pulling Rebecca into her arms. "Let it out," Nia whispered. "You've been holding this in too long." Rebecca cried harder, gripping Nia's shirt like a lifeline. "He was supposed to love me," she sobbed. "He did," Nia replied softly. "But he made choices that destroyed that love. That's on him, not you." Rebecca buried her face in her hands. "I feel so stupid. I should have seen it sooner." "No," Nia said firmly. "You trusted your husband. That's not stupidity. That's love. He's the one who failed, not you." Rebecca inhaled shakily, leaning back as Nia handed her a tissue. Her eyes were red and swollen, but the crying lifted a small weight from her chest. For the first time since discovering the truth, she felt a hint of clarity. As she caught her breath, her mind drifted somewhere unexpected, to the night she learned she was pregnant. It had been a December evening, cold enough that their breath fogged outside. She remembered clutching a positive test in her hand, heart racing. She had paced the bathroom floor for nearly 10 minutes before finally gathering the courage to share the news with George. When she approached him in the living room, he was sitting by the fireplace, sipping tea after a long day. She could still picture how his face lit up when she told him. "Are you serious?" he had asked, eyes wide, smile growing so quickly it took her breath away. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Happy tears, then. He caught her in his arms, lifting her slightly before setting her down gently. "We're going to be parents," he whispered against her hair. "We're going to be amazing parents." That moment used to be one of her favorites. Now it pierced her heart like glass. As the flashback dissolved, Rebecca wiped a tear from her jawline. Nia watched her carefully. "You're replaying it, aren't you?" Rebecca nodded. "He was so excited. He cried with me. We talked for hours about names and the nursery. He was loving." "You didn't imagine it," Nia said. "He was that man once. But the man he became, that man doesn't deserve to stand beside you while you carry his children." Rebecca's breathing faltered. "It hurts so much. I feel like something inside me died." Nia took both her hands gently. "Something did die, your trust. But you're still here, and you're not alone. I'm with you. Your parents are coming this weekend. You have people, you have love, you have strength." Rebecca exhaled shakily, letting Nia's words settle in her chest. She hadn't felt strong in a long time, but something inside her flickered. Maybe strength didn't feel powerful. Maybe it felt like simply refusing to fall apart again. Later that afternoon, after Rebecca had settled into Nia's guest room, her parents arrived. The moment her mother saw her swollen eyes and trembling shoulders, she embraced her tightly, rocking her the way she did when Rebecca was a little girl. Her father stood nearby, jaw tight with a mix of anger and heartbreak. He placed a steady hand on her back and spoke softly. "You did the right thing leaving. We're proud of you for protecting yourself and those babies." Rebecca's tears returned, but this time they weren't from pain alone. They were from gratitude, from realizing she wasn't facing this storm alone. Her mother stroked her hair gently. "We'll be here as long as you need us. You're not going through this by yourself." Rebecca clung to them both, letting herself rest in the comfort they offered. For the first time since discovering the affair, she didn't feel lost. She felt supported. She felt seen. She felt held. As the evening settled and the sky dimmed outside the townhouse window, Rebecca lay in the guest bed, listening to the soft murmurs of her parents and Nia talking quietly in the living room. She closed her eyes and whispered to her twins, "We're going to be okay. I promise." She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know how the divorce would unfold. She didn't know how George would react. But she did know one thing. She was not going back. She had chosen peace, even if she had to build it from nothing. And that was the first true step toward healing. The moment George walked into the house that afternoon, the silence hit him like a physical force. It wasn't the usual quiet of a home waiting for its family. It was the absence of something living, something warm. The air felt still, untouched, as if no one had breathed inside these walls for hours. He stepped into the foyer and paused, listening instinctively for sounds he had once taken for granted. Rebecca humming from the kitchen, the faint rustle of her moving through the hallway, even her soft breathing when she napped on the couch. Nothing, just emptiness. George set his briefcase down and moved deeper inside. His footsteps echoed sharply, reminding him that he was alone, entirely and painfully alone. The reality of the divorce papers started to settle into his bones with full weight. He walked toward the living room first. It was neat, almost too neat, as if someone had cleaned with careful purpose. On the mantel, the framed ultrasound photo remained, placed exactly where Rebecca left it. But something was off. The room felt stripped, not of objects, but of her presence. He swallowed hard and moved toward the staircase. His heartbeat quickened as he climbed each step. He already sensed what he was about to discover, but he needed to see it with his own eyes. The primary bedroom door was cracked open. George pushed it gently. Half the closet was empty. Dress hangers dangled loosely, spaced apart where Rebecca's clothes had once been. Her shoes were gone. Her jewelry box had vanished from the dresser. Even the faint scent of her perfume, the one she'd used for years, was fading. His throat tightened. He stepped inside the room fully, forcing himself to look around. Her pillow was missing from the bed. The blanket she favored was gone too. The space suddenly felt cold, as if warmth had been pulled from it deliberately. But nothing shattered him more than what he found on the nightstand, her wedding ring, placed neatly beside a folded note he immediately recognized as her handwriting. His breath trembled as he picked up the ring. It felt heavier than gold should feel, as though it carried the weight of every promise he had broken. He unfolded the short note. It consisted of 4 words. I meant every word. His vision blurred. He sank onto the edge of the bed, holding the ring tightly in his palm. For a long moment he couldn't move. The reality of losing her, truly losing her, pressed down on his chest until he felt he couldn't breathe. He whispered into the empty room, "Rebecca, what have I done?" No one answered. After several minutes, he stood almost robotically and walked down the hall toward the nursery. It was nearly finished, painted in soft pastel colors Rebecca had chosen, filled with tiny clothes folded with care, the rocking chair placed in the corner where she imagined countless nights soothing Austin and Savannah. George stepped inside and felt his heart twist painfully. The nursery represented everything he was supposed to be: a father, a partner, a protector. But instead of building a home, he had torn his apart. He lowered himself into the rocking chair. It creaked under his weight, a sound that cut through the silence bitterly. He let his hands fall to his sides, palms stinging with the memory of holding the divorce papers earlier. For the first time in a long while, tears slipped down his cheeks openly. He didn't wipe them away. Minutes passed before he finally rose and walked out of the nursery, feeling every step as if his legs carried a burden much heavier than guilt alone. His downfall didn't stop there. The next morning at work, the consequences followed him like a shadow. His assistant greeted him cautiously, eyes flicking toward him with concern. Team members spoke in hushed tones. Word was spreading, not the details, but the tension around him was obvious. He couldn't concentrate. Meetings blurred together. Contracts that usually energized him felt meaningless. Numbers on reports might as well have been blank pages. He found himself staring at his phone repeatedly, hoping for a message from Rebecca, knowing full well she had blocked him from calling directly. By noon, Chloe arrived at the office. She walked in confidently, but the moment she stepped inside and saw the exhaustion etched across his face, she frowned. "You look terrible," she said without sympathy. George didn't bother responding. He pushed a document aside, rubbed his temples, and muttered, "I'm dealing with a lot right now." Chloe crossed her arms. "Well, you better adjust. If she's serious about that divorce, things are going to get messy." He looked up sharply. "Do you ever stop thinking about yourself?" Her expression snapped with offense. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," he said, voice firm despite the turmoil inside him. "All you've done since yesterday is talk about how this affects you. I'm losing my family. My wife is carrying my children. She's gone because I lied, because I betrayed her trust. And you want to talk about lunch plans and negotiations?" Chloe scoffed. "Don't turn this on me. You willingly came to me. You knew what you were doing. And it was the worst mistake of my life," he replied, without hesitation. The words stunned her into silence. Chloe's expression hardened into something cold. "So that's how it is? After everything we've done together, you're running back to her?" He shook his head. "I'm not running anywhere. I'm trying to fix what I broke. And it has nothing to do with you." That was the moment Chloe's attitude shifted completely. She took a step back, guarded and offended. "Fine, fix your mess," she snapped. "But don't call me again. I'm done." She grabbed her purse, turned sharply, and walked out. Her heels clicked against the floor like punctuation marks to a chapter closing. George didn't chase her. He didn't apologize. He didn't even watch her leave. He simply lowered his head and exhaled, a mixture of regret and clarity settling over him. He was finally beginning to understand the true cost of his choices. By evening, he drove home again, dreading the silence waiting inside. When he stepped through the door, the emptiness was even more unbearable than before. The house felt like a museum, full of things but devoid of life. He wandered back to the bedroom, holding the ring again. He pressed it to his forehead, gripping it tightly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." But apologies spoken into empty rooms never reach the people who need to hear them. He needed to see Rebecca. He needed to try. He needed to face her, even if she refused to face him. And so, driven by a mix of desperation and guilt, George made a decision that would lead directly into the next breaking point, a confrontation he wasn't ready for, but one he could no longer avoid. By Saturday afternoon, the weight of the empty house had become unbearable. George had spent the morning pacing from room to room, unable to sit still, unable to silence the thoughts hammering in his head. Every corner of the home reminded him of Rebecca, the way she folded blankets, the way she arranged flowers on the kitchen counter, the quiet laughter she used to carry through the hallway when she talked to the twins in her belly. He couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his keys, left the house without a plan, and drove. The closer he got to Nia's neighborhood, the louder his heartbeat became. He didn't know what he would say. He only knew he needed to see Rebecca, to at least try to speak to her, even if she refused to listen. By the time he pulled into the familiar driveway, his hands were shaking against the steering wheel. Nia stepped out onto the porch before he even reached the steps. Her expression said everything. She expected him, she didn't want him there, and she was prepared for this moment. George stood at the bottom of the porch stairs, suddenly feeling smaller than he had in years. "Nia," he started, voice tense. "Please, I need to talk to her." Nia crossed her arms and leaned against the railing, her stance unyielding. "You're not coming inside," he swallowed. "I'm not here to fight. I just want to see her. 5 minutes, that's all." "No." Her voice was calm, steady, but firm enough to close a door he hadn't even reached yet. George stepped forward. "Please, she won't answer my calls. I need to explain." Nia held up a hand to silence him. "Explain?" she echoed. "Explain what, George? How you lied, how you betrayed her while she's carrying your children." Her words hit hard, not because they were new, but because they were true. He exhaled shakily. "I know I messed up. I know that. I just need to tell her." Nia cut him off again. "She doesn't want to hear it." George bristled, frustration tightening in his jaw. "You can't speak for her." "I'm not speaking for her," Nia replied. "I'm protecting her. She's exhausted, she's stressed, and she's hurt in a way I can't even put into words. She doesn't need you reopening those wounds." George took a step up the stairs, but Nia blocked the entrance completely. "Don't," she warned. He froze, not wanting to escalate things. "Nia, I love her." His voice cracked slightly. "I've loved her since the day I met her. I made the worst mistake of my life, but I want to fix this." Nia's eyes softened for a brief second, but only for a second. "If you loved her the way she loved you," she said quietly, "you wouldn't be standing here begging for another chance. You'd still be at home with her, where she deserved you all along." George's breath caught. Her words were sharp, cutting with precision. He looked toward the front door, as if Rebecca might appear at any moment. "Is she okay?" he asked, voice small. "She's surviving," Nia answered honestly. "Her family is here. They're helping. She has people who actually show up for her." The blow landed without mercy. George pressed a hand against his chest, as though the ache might ease if he physically held it in place. "Can you just tell her I stopped by?" he asked weakly. Nia shook her head. "No." He blinked, stunned. "What? Why?" "Because the last thing she needs is guilt," Nia said flatly. "Or pressure. Or confusion," Nia snapped. "Deserve?" she repeated loudly, stepping down one stair toward him. "You don't get to use that word right now. You don't get to claim anything. You gave up your place when you chose Chloe over the family you already had." George flinched at the sound of Chloe's name. Nia continued, relentless but honest. "Do you know what she looked like when she showed up on my doorstep? She was shaking so hard I had to hold her up. She cried until she fell asleep. She could barely walk from stress. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't rested. She's 7 months pregnant, George, and she was breaking in front of me." Her voice tightened. "She didn't yell. She didn't curse you. She didn't fall apart in anger. She fell apart in heartbreak." George felt his knees weaken. "I didn't know. I didn't realize. That's the problem," Nia said. "You never realized. You were always too busy. Too busy to talk. Too busy to come home. Too busy to notice your wife losing herself trying to hold on to the man she thought she married." He stood silent, absorbing every painful truth. After a long pause, Nia's voice softened. Not gentle, but honest. "She's not ready to hear you, and forcing this will only make it worse. She needs space. She needs calm. She needs safety." George nodded slowly, tears welling. I want to be better. I want to be there for her and the twins. Then start by respecting what she needs right now," Nia said. "Not what you want." Another long silence stretched between them. Finally, Nia stepped back onto the porch and placed one hand on the door. She looked at him with a mix of disappointment and a faint trace of empathy. "Go home, George," she said quietly. "Work on yourself, not for her, for those babies, for the father you're supposed to be." He stood still, unable to move, unable to argue. "Please," he whispered one last time. "Just tell her I'm sorry." Nia shook her head. "You already told her by how you're living. Words won't fix this." She opened the door halfway, pausing before stepping inside. "And George, if you really mean what you say, you'll prove it with actions. Not today, not tomorrow, consistently. That's the only thing that might matter in the future." The door closed with a soft click. George remained there on the porch, staring at the wooden door that separated him from the woman he had shattered. He stood there long enough for the sun to dip lower in the sky. Only when he could no longer hold back the weight in his chest did he step off the porch, walk to his car, and finally drive away, alone with the consequences he had created. The night settled over Jackson with heavy air and distant thunder rumbling behind thick clouds. Inside Nia's townhouse, the atmosphere was calm, at least on the surface. Rebecca lay on the couch, one hand resting on her belly, the slow rhythm of her breathing betraying exhaustion. The stress of the past week had worn her down more than she wanted to admit. Nia hovered in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner while keeping an eye on her friend. Rebecca hadn't said much since her parents left earlier that afternoon. She seemed quieter than usual, emotionally drained, and Nia hoped rest would give her even a small measure of peace. "Bex," Nia said gently, "you want anything? Water? Something to eat?" Rebecca exhaled softly. "Just water. My back is killing me." Nia filled a glass and brought it to her, placing a soft blanket around her shoulders. "You're carrying two humans, girl. If your back wasn't hurting, I'd be concerned." Rebecca offered a faint smile. "I know. I'm just trying to breathe today. That's all I have energy for. You don't need more than that," Nia said, settling beside her. "You're allowed to rest." Rebecca leaned her head back, letting her eyes close. "I didn't sleep last night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying everything." "You're safe now," Nia reminded her. "Focus on that." Rebecca nodded, but a sudden sharp sensation rippled across her abdomen. It wasn't one of the usual tightnesses she'd grown accustomed to. It was deeper, sharper, more demanding. She inhaled sharply, clutching her stomach. Nia immediately sat up straighter. "Rebecca? Hey, what's wrong?" Rebecca tried to speak, but another wave of pain cut through her. "Something's different," she whispered through gritted teeth. Nia's eyes widened. "Different how?" Before Rebecca could answer, a warm rush spread beneath her. She looked down and saw her sweatpants darkening rapidly. Her heartbeat surged. "Oh God, Nia," she gasped, panic rising. "My water just broke." Nia shot to her feet, her expression shifting from concern to full alert. "It's too early," she breathed. "You're barely 8 months." Rebecca tried to stand, but pain hit her again, sharper this time. She clutched the couch for support. "Nia, I can't move. You don't have to. Stay still," Nia said quickly, already grabbing her phone with trembling hands. Her voice shook but stayed strong enough to dial 911. "We're getting help." Rebecca tried to breathe steadily, but her heart raced wildly. The contractions were coming too fast, too strong, nothing like what she'd prepared for. She felt sweat bead on her forehead as fear crawled up her spine. The operator answered, and Nia's voice became firm, urgent. "Hi, I need an ambulance. My friend is pregnant with twins and her water just broke. She's having contractions, fast ones. Please hurry." Rebecca closed her eyes, trying to push away the sense of dread that filled her chest. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She still had weeks left. She wasn't ready. The babies weren't ready. Her breathing grew shaky. "Nia, what if something's wrong? What if—" "No," Nia said immediately, kneeling in front of her and taking both her hands. "Don't go there. You and those babies are fighters. The paramedics will be here soon." Rebecca tried to focus on Nia's steady voice, but the pain surged again, stealing her breath. She winced, gripping Nia's hands tightly until her knuckles turned white. Thunder rumbled outside, matching the tremor in her voice. "I'm scared." "I know," Nia said softly, brushing a tear from Rebecca's cheek. "But you're not alone. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Minutes felt like hours until flashing lights reflected through the living room window. The paramedics arrived quickly, moving with precision as they assessed Rebecca's condition. One paramedic crouched beside her. "Ma'am, we're going to take you to St. Mary's. You're going into preterm labor." Rebecca felt another contraction slam through her, forcing a cry from her throat. Nia grabbed her hand again. "Breathe, Bex. Remember what your doctor told you. In through your nose, out through your mouth." "I'm right here." Rebecca did her best to follow, though fear made her breath shallow. The paramedics carefully lifted her onto the gurney. She winced as the movement intensified the pain. The room blurred with motion, voices, flashing lights. It was all too fast. "Nia," Rebecca whispered as they rolled her toward the ambulance. "Call my parents. Let them know." "I will," Nia promised, brushing her shoulder gently. "I'll meet you at the hospital." Rebecca clutched the blanket around her as the cold air hit her skin. She felt vulnerable, terrified, and overwhelmed. She had imagined bringing her twins into the world in peace, with stability, preparation, calm. Instead, she was fighting panic with every breath. The paramedic inside the ambulance strapped her in securely. "We're going to take care of you, okay? Just keep breathing." Rebecca nodded weakly, but her thoughts scattered in every direction. Was something wrong with the babies? Were they too early? Would they be strong enough? Her heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the siren. As the ambulance pulled away from the curb, Nia stood in the driveway gripping her phone, her hand trembling slightly. She watched the ambulance disappear down the street before whispering to herself, Please, let her and the babies be okay." Nia didn't hesitate. She dialed the one number she never wanted to call again, the one Rebecca had cut off completely. The phone rang once, then twice. "Nia?" George answered, confusion and hope in his voice. Nia inhaled sharply, bracing herself. "George, it's Rebecca," she said, urgency filling her tone. "She's in labor. It's early. Get to St. Mary's now." George had barely slept the night before. He spent the early morning pacing through his empty living room, replaying every mistake he'd made until the guilt carved deeper into him. The house felt colder today, the silence sharper. He kept staring at the ring he found beside Rebecca's note, unable to bring himself to put it down. He sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, fingers pressed hard against his forehead, as if he could squeeze clarity from regret. He only knew he couldn't lose her forever. His phone vibrated on the table, the sound jolting him from his thoughts. He leaned forward to pick it up, expecting, hoping, praying it was Rebecca. But instead, he saw Nia's name on the screen. His heart stopped. She hadn't called him since the day she confronted him on her porch. She hadn't even let him near the house. If she was calling now, something was wrong, deeply wrong. He answered immediately. "Nia?" Her voice was urgent, breathless. "George, it's Rebecca." He sat up straight, pulse slamming against his ribs. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She's in labor," Nia said quickly. "Her water broke early. The paramedics just took her to St. Mary's." The world around him blurred. "What?" he whispered, breath catching. "It's too soon. She isn't due for weeks." "I know," Nia said. "I'm already on my way there. You should come now." George didn't even respond. He hung up the phone, grabbed his keys, and bolted for the door. He drove faster than he ever had in his life. Rain began falling in heavy sheets as he sped through the streets of Jackson, wipers struggling to keep up. Traffic lights blurred through the windshield. Every second felt like an hour. Every slow driver ahead of him felt like a threat to the only thing that mattered. His thoughts raced as fast as the tires on the wet pavement. She was alone in that ambulance. She was scared. She was carrying twins that were not ready to enter the world. And he wasn't beside her. His grip tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned pale. "Please be okay," he whispered over and over. "Please, Rebecca. Hold on." He didn't care about the consequences of speeding. He didn't care about anyone staring as he weaved through traffic. All he cared about was reaching her before something irreversible happened. He pressed harder on the gas as another wave of panic crashed over him. He pictured her crying. He pictured her struggling to breathe. He pictured doctors surrounding her, alarms sounding, medical staff moving quickly. And he wasn't there. The guilt felt suffocating. "How could I have done this to her?" he whispered, voice cracking. "How could I have let her face this alone?" He remembered the moments they used to dream about, painting the nursery together, planning for their twins, imagining sleepless nights and little baby clothes scattered across the room. Back then, he believed nothing could break them. Now everything was broken. He ran another light, earning a horn from a startled driver, but he didn't slow down. Not tonight. The hospital came into view, a tall building glowing against the storm-dark sky. Emergency lights flashed near the entrance. He rushed into the parking lot, barely remembering to put the car in park before jumping out. He sprinted toward the entrance, rain soaking through his clothes in seconds. Inside the lobby, he went straight to the front desk, breath uneven. "Rebecca Whitman," he said quickly. "She came in by ambulance. She's pregnant with twins." The nurse typed rapidly, glanced at the screen, then looked up. She was taken to labor and delivery. "Take the elevator to the 3rd floor." He didn't wait for anything else. He charged toward the elevator, hitting the button repeatedly. When the doors finally opened, he stepped inside and pressed 3 with shaking fingers. As the elevator ascended, he gripped the railing to steady himself. His mind replayed the last time he saw her, not in person, but through the echo of her absence. She had been strong enough to walk away from him, strong enough to choose herself. But now she was vulnerable, and he wasn't there to protect her. The guilt nearly crushed him. The doors opened. He rushed into the hallway, moving past nurses and doctors until he found the waiting area. Nia was there, pacing. When she saw him, her expression was conflicted, relief mixed with hesitation. "Is she okay?" he demanded. Breath uneven. Nia stepped toward him, her voice low, serious. "They took her in immediately. She's in preterm labor. It's progressing fast." George swallowed hard. "Can I see her?" "Not yet," Nia explained, shaking her head. "They're trying to stabilize her. She's in a lot of pain." He closed his eyes, exhaling shakily. He imagined Rebecca lying in a hospital bed, gripping the rails, panic in her eyes. He hated that the first crisis in their children's lives was happening without him there to hold her hand. He ran his hand over his face. I failed her. I should have been there. Nia didn't respond immediately. Her anger from days earlier had softened but not disappeared. She studied him carefully. George, she didn't want you near her because she was protecting herself. But right now isn't about you. It's about her and those babies. If you want to be here, stay calm. Be useful. No stress. No drama. He nodded quickly. I will. Just tell me what I can do. Sit, Nia said simply. Pray. Wait. Be ready. He sank into a chair, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped tightly together. He stared at the floor, his breath uneven. Every sound in the hallway, every footstep, every shout, every beep, made his heart jolt. She can't do this alone, he whispered. Nia sat across from him, her voice gentler this time. She isn't alone. She has us. And now you're here. He lifted his eyes slightly, surprised by the shift in her tone. She continued softly, Don't think this changes what happened, but right now, she might need you more than she realizes. George nodded, wiping a tear he didn't bother to hide. The waiting area grew quieter. The air thickened with fear, hope, and uncertainty. Then, suddenly, a nurse burst through the double doors. Family for Rebecca Whitman? Both George and Nia stood instantly. The nurse looked tense. Her condition is changing. We need to move her into an emergency C-section. Nia covered her mouth. The nurse continued, urgency tightening her voice. We're losing the heartbeat of baby B. The hallway spun. The ground beneath George felt like it shifted violently. His chest squeezed until breathing seemed impossible. Nia whispered, Oh God. The nurse gestured toward the surgical wing. Please follow me. But you won't be allowed inside the operating room. George nodded numbly, his legs barely moving. He followed because he had no other choice, because the moment he feared most was unfolding right in front of him, ready or not. The surgical wing of St. Mary's was a world of bright lights, swift footsteps, and clipped voices echoing through sterile hallways. George followed the nurse through the double doors until she directed him toward a glass partition that separated the waiting area from the operating room corridor. You'll need to stay here, she said firmly. We'll update you as soon as we can. He nodded, though every fiber in him felt wrong standing still while Rebecca was wheeled into a room fighting for her life and the lives of their children. Nia stood beside him, arms wrapped around herself tightly. Both of them stared at the hallway where Rebecca had disappeared minutes earlier. George pressed his hand against the glass, desperate to feel closer to her. Please let her be okay, he whispered. Silence settled between them, heavy and sharp. Inside the surgical prep area, nurses moved swiftly around Rebecca. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale and strained. She fought to stay awake, clinging to consciousness as contractions surged through her abdomen. Rebecca, one of the nurses said softly, brushing hair from her forehead. We're going to take care of you. You're in preterm labor, and one of the babies is showing signs of distress. We need to deliver them now. Rebecca's lips trembled. My babies, are they? We're doing everything we can, the nurse reassured her. Focus on your breathing. You're not alone. Rebecca nodded weakly, fighting the mounting fear pressing against her chest. Her vision faded in and out as they transferred her to the operating table. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled the room, and the overhead lights seemed brighter than anything she had ever seen. Her heart pounded, her breath shuddered. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. A doctor leaned over her, speaking calmly. Rebecca, you're doing great. We're going to put you under anesthesia now. When you wake up, you'll have 2 beautiful babies in this world. Stay with us. She swallowed, tears slipping down her cheeks. Please, save them, she whispered. Those were her last words before her eyes fluttered closed and darkness took over. Outside, minutes dragged like hours. George paced the hallway relentlessly, back and forth, unable to stand still. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. He wanted to shout, scream, break through the operating doors, anything to feel useful. But all he could do was wait. Nia watched him carefully. She had seen him frantic before, but never like this. Never this helpless. He ran his hand through his hair, stopping suddenly. I should be in there, he breathed, voice shaking. She shouldn't be alone. She isn't alone, Nia said firmly. She has an entire medical team with her. I should have been there long before she reached this point, he corrected painfully. Nia didn't disagree. The hallway echoed with distant announcements and soft chatter of nurses moving quickly. Every sound felt like a countdown. Another 10 minutes passed. Then 20. George pressed both hands against the wall, bowing his head. This is my fault, he said quietly. She's stressed because of me. The babies came early because of everything I put her through. Nia stepped closer, her voice steady but not gentle. You hurt her, yes. You pushed her to walk away. But this moment right now? This isn't punishment. It's a medical emergency. Blaming yourself won't help her. He exhaled shakily. I love her, he whispered. I never stopped. I was stupid. You're here now. That's what matters. You stay right here until someone tells you what's happening. Don't fall apart. She needs you steady. George nodded, forcing himself to breathe through the panic lodged in his chest. Then, the doors to the operating hallway swung open. A doctor stepped out wearing blue scrubs and gloves stained faintly from the procedure. Mr. Whitman? The doctor asked. Yes. George answered immediately, voice cracking. The doctor removed his mask slowly. We managed to deliver both babies. George closed his eyes for a brief second, relief and dread crashing together violently. And Rebecca? He asked, voice trembling. She's unconscious, the doctor said gently. She lost more blood than we expected. We're monitoring her closely. She's stable for now, but we'll continue to watch her. George swallowed hard, gripping the railing beside him. And the twins? Nia asked. The doctor nodded, his expression calm but serious. The first baby, Austin, came out with a strong heartbeat. He's breathing on his own, but we have him in the neonatal unit for monitoring. Austin, George whispered, his chest tightening with emotion. The second baby, Savannah, the doctor continued, had a weaker heartbeat at birth. We had to intervene quickly. She's currently on oxygen support, and the NICU team is doing their best to stabilize her. Nia covered her mouth, tears welling. George felt his knees weaken. But they're alive? He asked, barely able to speak. They're alive, the doctor confirmed. But they are premature and need extensive monitoring. George nodded, tears slipping from his eyes. He didn't care about the exhaustion, the guilt, the past. All he cared about was that his children were in the world. The doctor continued gently. You can see them one at a time in the NICU, and Rebecca will be moved to recovery once we finish monitoring her vitals. Can I see her? George asked. Not yet. She needs time to stabilize. But we'll let you know the moment she's ready for visitors. George nodded weakly. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you so much. The doctor gave a reassuring nod before turning back through the operating doors. A heavy silence settled. Nia wiped her eyes. They're here, George, she whispered. Your babies. They're here. George let out a shaky breath, leaning back against the wall as tears streamed freely down his face. But the relief didn't last long, because the next words from the nurse approaching down the hallway made both him and Nia freeze in place. Mr. Whitman, we need you in the NICU right away. Baby Savannah's condition is changing. George's heart stopped. The storm wasn't over, not even close. The hallways leading to the NICU were quiet in a way that felt heavy, almost sacred. The lighting was softer here, the air cooler, machines humming steadily behind glass rooms where tiny lives fought battles larger than their size. Every step George took felt weighted with fear and hope tangled together. A nurse guided him toward a small room on the right. Inside, Austin lay beneath a warm lamp, wrapped in gentle tubes and tiny monitors. His chest rose and fell, steady, determined. George pressed a hand to the glass, his throat tightening. My boy. The words escaped as a whisper. He didn't realize a tear had fallen until it hit his wrist. Austin's small body looked impossibly fragile, yet somehow stronger than anything George felt inside himself at that moment. The nurse beside him smiled softly. He's doing well, she said. For his gestational age, he's showing strong signs. He just needs time. Time. Something George wished he could rewind. Before he could respond, a different nurse appeared beside him. We need you in the next room, she said gently. Savannah is stable enough now for a brief visit. George's breath caught. Savannah. He followed her to the left, where another glass room held a smaller incubator surrounded by more tubes, more wires, more machines than Austin's. The rhythmic beeping seemed louder here, a constant reminder of how delicate the situation was. There she was, Savannah, tiny, pale, fighting. Her chest rose with effort, aided by a small oxygen tube. Her little fingers twitched, but didn't curl. Her heartbeat pulsed weakly on the screen. George's feet rooted to the floor. She looked so vulnerable that his chest tightened in pain. The nurse spoke softly beside him. She's responding to treatment, but she needs close monitoring. The next 70 to 2 hours are very important. He nodded slowly, eyes never leaving Savannah. May I? His voice cracked. May I touch her hand? The nurse guided him to a small opening in the incubator. 2 fingers only, and slow, his hand trembled as he reached inside. He touched her gently, barely a feather's weight, and yet her tiny fingers moved, curling faintly around the edge of his touch. George broke completely. A tear fell onto the incubator's surface. I'm here, he whispered, leaning forward. Daddy's here. I'm so sorry you came early. I'm so sorry you had to fight this hard." For a long moment, he just stayed there, breathing in sync with the machines keeping his daughter stable. Behind him, footsteps approached. He turned. Nia stood at the doorway, eyes red but calmer now. "She's stronger than she looks," Nia said. George nodded, swallowing. "I can see that." Nia stepped inside, watching Savannah carefully. "They said Rebecca is in recovery," she murmured. "She hasn't woken up yet." George exhaled shakily. "I want to see her. As soon as they let me—" "You will," Nia said, then quietly let her rest. "She's been through so much." George didn't argue. Instead, he looked back at Savannah, memorizing every detail of her small body. "This is why I have to change. This is why I have to become better. Not for forgiveness. For them." Rebecca woke the next morning. It was slow, groggy, like surfacing from deep water. She blinked against the dim hospital lighting and tried to move, but a wave of soreness rippled through her abdomen. A nurse noticed. "Rebecca, you're awake." Her memory jolted. "The babies. They're alive," the nurse said quickly. "They're in the NICU. Austin is stable. Savannah is being monitored closely." Relief hit her so hard tears formed instantly. "And," she whispered, "is anyone here?" The nurse hesitated only for a second. "George hasn't left the hospital since the surgery." Rebecca closed her eyes, emotions swelling in a confusing tide. Hours later, Rebecca was transferred to a recovery room. She sat upright slowly, heart pounding with anticipation and fear. She wasn't ready to see George, not emotionally, but the weight of the NICU news pressed heavier than resentment. The door opened quietly. George stepped inside. He froze. Rebecca looked exhausted and pale, her hair tucked behind her ears, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. She inhaled sharply at the sight of him but didn't speak. George swallowed hard, voice rough. I'm glad you're awake." She nodded but kept her eyes lowered. Silence stretched. It wasn't hostile, just fragile. "How are the babies?" she asked softly. He stepped closer but not too close. "Austin is strong. Savannah, she's fighting, but she's holding on. The doctors are doing everything they can." Rebecca closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I want to see them." "I'll take you," he whispered, "whenever you're ready." Another silence, this one softer. Rebecca looked at him, really looked, and something in her expression shifted. Not forgiveness, not trust, but the first moment in a long time where she didn't look at him with pain alone. "Thank you," she said quietly. Those two words meant more than she realized, and George understood the tone immediately. This was a beginning, not a reconciliation, not healing, just the first small thaw in a winter that nearly destroyed them. Rebecca's discharge came sooner than she felt ready for. Her body still hurt, her emotions were frayed, and every thought in her mind circled back to Austin and Savannah. Leaving the hospital without them felt unnatural, almost cruel, even though the nurses reassured her it was routine for preterm babies. She stared at the wheelchair waiting beside her hospital bed, hands resting protectively over her incision area. George waited in the doorway. He kept his distance, every movement careful, respectful of the invisible boundaries she maintained. His eyes held the same quiet devotion he'd shown for days in the NICU, present, steady, asking for nothing. "You sure you're okay?" he asked softly. Rebecca nodded, though she wasn't. Physically, she was healing. Emotionally, she was a tangled storm. But one thing was clear. She needed to be somewhere stable, somewhere prepared for the twins when they finally came home. And despite everything, that place was the house she once shared with George. "I'm ready," she murmured. George stepped aside so the nurse could wheel her through the hallway. As they passed the NICU doors, Rebecca felt her throat tighten. She longed to scoop her babies into her arms and carry them out with her, but she knew they needed more time. George sensed her tension. "We can come back later today," he whispered. She didn't respond but appreciated the effort. The ride home was quiet, not hostile, just quiet in a way that felt thoughtful, like both were afraid to disturb the fragile peace forming between them. Outside the window, Jackson's streets rolled by, familiar but distant. When the car pulled into the driveway, Rebecca stared at the house for a long moment. Memories pressed against her heart, laughter in the kitchen, holidays filled with warmth, late-night talks in bed, but also pain, betrayal, tears cried alone. She took a slow breath. This wasn't a romantic return. It was practical, necessary, for the children. George hurried out to help her from the car. He didn't touch her without asking. "Do you want my arm?" She hesitated, then nodded. His hand came to her forearm gently, not possessive, not lingering, just enough support to help her stand. Walking was slow. Recovery from surgery made every step deliberate. George matched her pace perfectly, never rushing, never drawing attention to her weakness. Inside, the home smelled faintly of fresh linen and mild cleaning products, nothing overwhelming, almost as if he'd tried to make it neutral for her return. The living room was tidy, the lights low. No trace of the past 2 months' chaos remained. Rebecca's eyes landed immediately on the nursery door at the end of the hall. George followed her gaze. "I kept everything the same," he said. "I didn't touch the layout. I thought you'd want it exactly how you planned it." Emotion tightened her chest. She didn't speak, but the acknowledgement was there, felt, not said. He guided her to the master bedroom. The bed was freshly made, soft white sheets and a light blanket. On the nightstand she noticed a vase filled with lilies, her favorite, clean, elegant, peaceful. "I can move to the guest room," George said quickly. "You don't have to share a space with me. I'll give you all the privacy you want." Rebecca nodded. "Thank you." She appreciated that he didn't assume anything. George helped her sit on the bed, then stepped back. "Do you need water, tea, anything? A glass of water would be fine." He moved swiftly, returning with a chilled glass and placing it within reach. She took it slowly. "Thank you." He nodded, relieved she spoke without tension. For a while, silence settled between them like a third presence, not unwelcome, just fragile. Rebecca leaned back against the pillows, her body heavy with exhaustion. She closed her eyes, letting fatigue wash over her. Sleep took her quickly. Later that evening, Rebecca woke to the soft glow of the bedside lamp. The room was quiet, but she heard faint noises from down the hallway, the sound of George moving around, likely organizing things for the baby's return someday. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her she hadn't eaten much. She swung her legs slowly over the edge of the bed, bracing for the now familiar ache in her abdomen. Before she could stand, George appeared at the doorway. "You're up," he said. "I didn't want to wake you. I made dinner. If you're hungry." She blinked. "You cooked?" He gave a small, sheepish smile. "I followed one of your saved recipes on the tablet, the lemon chicken one you love." Something warm flickered inside her chest, uninvited but real. Yeah, I could eat." He offered his arm again. This time she didn't hesitate. At the dining table he pulled out a chair for her and served a careful portion. They ate in silence at first, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that felt like healing soil, not fully grown, but fertile. Halfway through the meal, Rebecca spoke. "You didn't have to go through all this effort." He set his fork down gently. "I know I didn't have to, but I wanted to." Their eyes met. He didn't speak further, didn't push, didn't plead. He simply allowed the moment to breathe. For the first time in months, Rebecca felt something other than pain around him, not trust, not forgiveness, but possibility. That night, George heard Savannah's and Austin's names echo in his mind. He stood in the doorway of the nursery long after Rebecca had fallen asleep, hands in his pockets, staring at the twin cribs they'd built together. He whispered softly to the empty room, "I'm going to do better. I don't care how long it takes." What he didn't know was that Rebecca, awake in the next room, heard a faint tremor in his voice and felt her heart react, quietly, cautiously, but undeniably. The first real conversation between Rebecca and George didn't happen suddenly. It didn't arrive with dramatic shouting or an emotional explosion. Instead, it arrived quietly, almost shyly, the way two people approach a damaged bridge they're not sure is safe to cross. It was 2 nights after Rebecca returned home. She had just finished pumping milk for the twins at the small station near the corner of the bedroom, something she did every few hours so the NICU nurses could feed Austin and Savannah with her supply. The routine left her tired, both from the physical strain and from the emotional weight of not being able to hold her babies whenever she wanted. She gently capped the bottles, placing them inside a cooler bag for the morning drop-off. George tapped lightly at the open door. He didn't intrude. He never assumed. He always waited for a signal. "Do you want help carrying that?" he asked. "I've got it," she replied softly, wiping her hands on a towel. But she didn't say it coldly, not like the early days of their separation. He stepped inside only halfway, leaning against the doorframe, his expression thoughtful. "Rebecca, can we talk?" She froze for a second, not because she didn't expect this moment. She had known it would come eventually, but because her heart wasn't sure what to do. For weeks, they had danced around their wounds and responsibilities, focusing only on the baby's needs. But now, with the house quiet and no nurses or machines buzzing around them, the truth between them felt closer, impossible to ignore. She set the cooler bag down and lowered herself onto the edge of the bed. Her movements were slow, the healing incision reminding her to be patient with her body. "Okay," she said quietly. George exhaled shakily, almost as if he had been holding that breath for months. He walked toward the chair near the window, but instead of sitting, he hovered, hands on the backrest, nervous energy spilling through his posture. I don't even know where to start, he admitted. Start with the truth, she said, her voice calm but firm. For once, those words pierced him, not cruelly, but honestly. He nodded, swallowing hard. You're right, he whispered. You deserve that. He finally sat, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. His eyes dropped to the floor as if he couldn't bear to meet hers yet. Rebecca, I almost lost you. His voice broke on the last word. She felt something shift inside her chest, though she kept her expression steady. I almost lost our kids. I almost lost this home. I almost lost everything that matters, he continued, each word trembling slightly. And it was my fault, my choices, my weakness. Silence filled the room, not cold, not angry, just heavy. He kept talking, voice low and raw. When I got to the hospital and they rushed you into surgery, I realized how little control I had. I realized how fragile everything is, and I realized just how badly I messed up. Not just once, but for months. Every lie I told, every night I wasn't here. He stopped, wiping at his eyes. I don't know how you can even stand to look at me. Rebecca looked down at her hands. Some days it's hard, she admitted. Other days, it hurts in ways I can't explain. He nodded without argument. You should feel that way. He finally lifted his eyes to meet hers. They were red and tired, but sincere. I loved you the whole time, Rebecca. That's the truth I cling to. But I wasn't acting like a man who loved his wife. I was acting like someone who didn't deserve you. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She brushed it away quickly. She didn't want pity. She didn't want excuses. She wanted honesty, and for the first time in a long time she was getting it. I still love you, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. George's breath caught. But, she continued, her tone steadying, loving you doesn't erase what you did. It doesn't erase the nights I cried alone, the fear, the humiliation, the way my heart felt like it was, breaking every hour. She pressed a hand to her chest. You shattered something inside me, George, and I don't know if it can ever go back to what it was. He nodded, tears slipping down his face openly now. I know. I don't expect things to go back. I only hope we can build something new, something stronger, something honest. Rebecca looked at him for a long moment. She saw the guilt etched into every corner of his face. She saw the humility in his posture. She saw the fear, not of losing comfort or reputation, but of losing her. I'm scared, she confessed. He inhaled sharply. I am too. I'm scared that if I give you another chance, you'll hurt me again. I'm scared that you'll fall back into old habits. I'm scared that I'll never fully trust you, even if I want to. George leaned forward, placing a trembling hand over his chest. I'll prove myself, every day, not with grand gestures, with consistency, with honesty, with transparency. You'll never have to wonder where I am or who I'm with. She nodded slowly. And I think, he hesitated, I think we should talk to someone, together, a professional. Not because we're failing, but because I don't want to fail again. For the first time since she discovered the betrayal, Rebecca felt her defenses soften without fear. You're talking about counseling? She asked. He nodded. Yes. I'll go alone if you want. I'll go with you. I'll do whatever moves us towards something better. Rebecca exhaled, long, shaky, uncertain. I think we might need that, she admitted, because if there's any chance of rebuilding, we can't do it alone. George covered his face with his hands for a moment, overwhelmed with relief. Thank you, he whispered through his hands. Thank you for not giving up on me completely. Don't thank me yet, she replied gently. We're not fixed. We're just beginning. He dropped his hands, nodding with reverence. I'll take a beginning, he said softly. I'll earn every inch of progress we make. Rebecca reached for the cooler bag on the bed, but her hand slipped slightly, fatigue taking over. George sprang up instinctively. Let me, he said. This time she didn't argue. He lifted the bag, carefully organized the bottles, and set everything by the bedroom door. Then he turned back to her. Rebecca? He asked quietly. Yes? He didn't step closer. He didn't touch her. He didn't assume affection. He simply asked, Can I sit beside you? Not to hold you, not to push anything, just to sit. She considered it, not out of hesitation, but out of meaning. Then she nodded. He sat gently on the edge of the bed, leaving space between them. Side by side, they breathed the same air, shared the same room, and held the same silent wish, the wish for healing. Not perfection, not instant forgiveness, just a path forward. For the first time in a long time, both believed it might be possible. The next morning, sunlight spilled gently across the bedroom floor, lifting Rebecca from a light sleep. She blinked slowly, adjusting to the quiet. For a split second, her mind expected the familiar hum of NICU machines or the soft cries of the twins, but the house was still, the kind of stillness that felt both peaceful and incomplete. She shifted carefully, her body reminding her that healing was still ongoing. The conversation from the night before replayed in her thoughts, not with pain this time, but with a cautious sense of direction. They had finally spoken honestly. Nothing had magically healed, but something had softened inside her, enough that the idea of taking small steps forward didn't feel impossible. A gentle knock came at the door. "Rebecca, are you awake?" George's voice was low, cautious. "Yes," she answered. He stepped in holding a tray, oatmeal, sliced fruit, and a cup of warm tea. "Simple, thoughtful. You need the calories," he said quietly. "The nurses reminded me yesterday. They said your supply depends on steady meals, and—" His words trailed as if he feared saying too much. She nodded, appreciating the gesture. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I also called the NICU," he continued. "Austin gained 2 ounces overnight, and Savannah held steady. They said we can hold them again during afternoon rounds." The news brought a warmth to Rebecca's chest, lifting her spirits. "That's good," she said, unable to hide the smile tugging at her lips. George smiled faintly too, relieved to see even a small spark of her joy. He set the tray beside her. "Eat while it's warm. I'll wait downstairs." Before he turned away, she spoke gently. "You can stay." He paused, then quietly took the chair near the window, giving her space but remaining present. Rebecca ate slowly. They didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't tight or strained. It felt like 2 people learning how to share a room again without tension. That week they had their first session, a modest office in a local therapy center, soft lighting, calming tones, and a therapist with steady eyes who didn't take sides. It was unfamiliar at first, like standing in a spotlight they didn't ask for, but necessary. Rebecca sat with her hands folded in her lap, speaking with quiet courage. "I was carrying our children while feeling like a stranger in my own marriage," she said. "The loneliness was overwhelming. I tried to hide it, but it ate at me every day." George listened with his full body, eyes down, shoulders tense, jaw tight, ashamed, but committed. "I hurt her," he admitted, "and I hate that. I was selfish. I didn't communicate my fears or stress. Instead, I ran toward a distraction I should have never allowed into our lives." The therapist guided them gently. "What do you both want moving forward?" Rebecca inhaled slowly. "I want honesty, consistency. I want to feel safe with him again." George nodded. "And I want to earn that safety. I know it won't be quick." They discussed communication boundaries, expectations, routines around the twins, and the emotional triggers that came with betrayal. Nothing was solved instantly, but each session peeled away another layer of silence they had lived under. After their 3rd appointment, Rebecca found herself standing beside him in the parking lot, the warm Mississippi breeze brushing her skin. "Thank you for showing up," she said quietly. He looked at her, eyes soft. "There's nowhere else I want to be." For the first time in months, she believed it. Back at home, the rhythm of TO parenting became a careful dance, sometimes smooth, sometimes clumsy, but always grounded in their shared love for the twins. Every morning, they drove together to the hospital. They sat side by side during feedings, Rebecca cradling Savannah against her chest while George held Austin. Nurses often smiled witnessing the care in their movements. One morning, Austin let out a loud sneeze, startling both of them. George's eyes nearly doubled in panic. "Is that normal?" he blurted. Rebecca laughed softly, the sound of it surprising them both. "Babies sneeze, George." He exhaled dramatically, causing her to shake her head in amusement. Across the room, Savannah wrinkled her tiny forehead, and Rebecca whispered soothing words while George watched, captivated. The bond between mother and daughter warmed something deep inside him. He knew he had damaged their marriage, but seeing Rebecca with their children reminded him why he had fought to repair everything. As days passed, they developed a natural rhythm. He prepped the cooler bags, breast milk. She organized the NICU updates in a journal. He cleaned and sanitized everything without being asked. She coordinated feedings and kangaroo care times. They alternated who held which twin, sharing those early precious minutes. The teamwork didn't erase the past, but it built a foundation for the future. Late one night, after a long day at the hospital, they stepped into the nursery together. Rebecca leaned lightly against the door frame, watching George adjust the crib blankets out of habit, even though the twins weren't home yet. "You know," she said softly, "you've straightened that blanket 5 times today." He froze. "I just want it perfect for them." She let out a quiet laugh. "They're going to spit up on it in 2 minutes." George laughed too, a full, genuine laugh that filled the room and tugged at something deep within her. Another night they worked together assembling the twins' stroller. George insisted he didn't need the instructions. 30 minutes later, the wheels were pointing in 4 different directions and the frame was stuck. Rebecca couldn't help it. She laughed until tears threatened her eyes. He looked up helplessly. Okay, maybe I should read the manual. She handed it to him with a small smirk. Maybe. Moments like these didn't erase the hurt, but they softened the scars. Each shared laugh reminded Rebecca that healing didn't always come through heavy conversations. Sometimes it came through simple things, moments where they remembered they were once friends before they were anything else. Every day, George made choices that reflected change. He left his phone out in the open, never hidden. He communicated his schedule clearly. He asked Rebecca's opinion before making decisions. He apologized when he sensed tension rather than ignoring it. He listened, truly listened, when she expressed her fears. Rebecca didn't rush. She didn't leap back into their marriage blindly, but she noticed the effort, the sincerity. And slowly, something began to grow again. Not the old love, that one had been shattered. This was new, deliberate, constructed with intention. They weren't a couple again, not yet, but they were becoming partners again, and that was the first step toward everything they hoped to rebuild. The shift didn't happen overnight. It came quietly, almost shyly, the way a new season reveals itself slowly rather than all at once. Rebecca had spent weeks watching George with the twins, watching how carefully he held them, how tenderly he spoke to them, how attentively he responded to every sound, every small need. She also watched how he treated her. He didn't push. He didn't assume. He didn't demand a status update on their marriage or force emotional progress. Instead, he showed up every day, every appointment, every NICU visit, steady and present. And presence, Rebecca realized, was a kind of love too, one she hadn't felt from him in a long time. It was a Thursday afternoon when Rebecca finally made the call. She sat at the kitchen table, a cup of lukewarm tea beside her, reviewing NICU notes. The scent of laundry detergent lingered in the air, where baby clothes were drying on a rack. The house no longer felt foreign, it felt lived in again, not fully healed, not completely restored, but no longer hollow. The twins were getting stronger. They were expected to come home in a couple of weeks. A heaviness sat in her chest at the thought of bringing them into a house divided by legal paperwork. Her phone buzzed. Her attorney's name lit the screen. Rebecca stared at it for a long moment before answering. Hello? Rebecca, her attorney said warmly. Just checking in about the next filing deadline. We're approaching the window to finalize. Rebecca inhaled slowly, grounding herself. I need to pause everything, she said. The attorney grew quiet. Pause? Not withdraw? Rebecca pressed her hand lightly to her stomach, more out of habit now than necessity. Not withdraw, she clarified softly. But I'm not ready to move forward either. Things have changed. We're working through a lot, and I need time. Her attorney didn't question her choice. I understand. I'll mark the file as pending. No deadlines will move forward until you tell me otherwise. Thank you, Rebecca whispered. When she hung up, she sat still for several minutes. It was done. The divorce wasn't gone, but it wasn't advancing. George walked into the kitchen moments later carrying a load of freshly folded blankets for the nursery. He froze when he saw her expression, not distressed, not anxious, but contemplative. You okay? He asked gently. She nodded. Yes. I just made a call. His throat tightened. About us? She looked up at him, her eyes steady. I asked my lawyer to pause the divorce. For a moment, George forgot how to breathe. He set the blankets down carefully, almost reverently, as if anything sudden might break the delicate moment between them. Rebecca, his voice cracked. You didn't have to do that. For me. I didn't, she replied. I did it for all of us, for the twins, and because I see you trying, really trying. She paused. I'm not ready to reconcile, but I'm not ready to end this either. George swallowed hard, tears gathering in his eyes. That's more than I deserve, but thank you. She nodded, but before she could say more, her phone buzzed again. The NICU sending a photo update. It was a picture of Austin and Savannah lying side by side, tiny hands brushing each other. Rebecca smiled. For the first time in a long time, her smile held hope. The following morning, George had a meeting scheduled with his own attorney regarding financial disclosures. Even though Rebecca had paused the process, he felt obligated to keep transparency moving, a gesture of good faith. His attorney greeted him with a stack of forms. We'll finalize these asset reports so everything remains in order, the attorney said. Even if things are on hold. George nodded. Of course. But as he began reviewing the documents, seeing his name paired with marital dissolution, seeing the itemized list of everything they built together, seeing his home, vehicles, investments, and savings laid out like pieces divided on a chessboard, an unexpected wave of grief slammed into him. His attorney paused mid-sentence. George? He looked pale. Do you want water? George shook his head, gripping the armrests of the chair. "I almost lost her," he whispered. "I almost lost them." The attorney softened. The pause is a good sign, but that wasn't what broke him. What shattered him was realizing how cold the paperwork looked, how sterile and distant, compared to the warmth he felt sitting in the NICU with Rebecca, holding their tiny children between them. He looked at the signature line, his signature, on documents that spelled out the end of the family he had begged heaven for years ago. Tears spilled quietly down his cheeks. "I don't want this," he said hoarsely. "I don't want any of this. I created the mess. I pushed her away. I failed her. But I want my family. Not as a legal fight, not as a divided home." He wiped his face with the back of his hand. His attorney nodded sympathetically. "Then keep doing what you're doing. Change through action. Healing isn't linear, but it's possible." George nodded, emotion gripping his throat. "I won't sign another line until she tells me the final decision, and this time, it wasn't avoidance. It was commitment." A week later, once the twins were finally strong enough to be discharged, Rebecca and George shared one of their first experiences as a unit of 4. The pediatrician approved short outdoor walks, so they decided on a nearby park, quiet, open, and gentle enough for premature babies. Rebecca pushed the stroller slowly, careful not to jostle the twins. Savannah slept soundly, her tiny fists curled near her chin. Austin blinked curiously at the filtered sunlight peeking through the stroller canopy. George walked beside Rebecca, keeping pace with her steps. The air smelled faintly of cut grass, and a light breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Parents with toddlers passed by with polite smiles. Joggers nodded. A few people paused to peek at the twins, cooing softly. "They're beautiful," one woman said. Rebecca smiled. "Thank you." George stood proudly but respectfully beside her, not overshadowing, not claiming the moment, sharing it. Halfway down the path, they found an empty bench near a pond. Rebecca gently lifted Savannah, while George unbuckled Austin, each holding a twin against their chests. For several minutes they just sat. No rush, no tension, just breathing in the sweetness of 2 tiny lives who had fought hard to be here. Austin let out a tiny hiccup. George chuckled under his breath. Rebecca smiled at the sound, a real relaxed smile. She glanced sideways at him. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at their children, his expression soft, full of reverence and responsibility. A man who knew exactly how close he came to losing everything. The sight moved something deep inside her. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. But for the first time, she imagined a future where forgiveness wasn't just a distant possibility, but a reachable one. A future where Austin and Savannah grew up watching 2 parents who fought their way back to each other with patience and humility. A future where love wasn't blind, but mature, aware, and earned. Rebecca lowered her head and kissed Savannah's forehead. George watched her from the corner of his eye, admiration stitched into every breath, but he didn't speak. Sometimes silence tells the truth more clearly than words ever could. The afternoon sun dipped lower as they continued their slow walk through the park. Rebecca pushed the stroller while George walked a careful step behind her, ready to help but not overstep. The twins slept peacefully, their soft breathing a comforting rhythm that grounded both parents in shared gratitude. The breeze carried the faint scent of blooming flowers from a nearby garden, and the gentle hum of distant laughter filled the air. It was the kind of day that made families linger outside, grateful for simple joys. Watching the twins rest safely in the stroller reminded Rebecca of how fragile life had felt just weeks earlier, the emergency, the fear, the surgery, the sleepless nights in the NICU. She slowed her steps. Something inside her had shifted over the past few days. Not something loud or sudden, something quiet, steady, undeniable. She had seen George show up not just for her but for Savannah and Austin. She had watched him shed his pride, his excuses, his old habits. She had heard sincerity in his voice, not desperation, intention, not panic. Healing wasn't complete. Trust wasn't fully restored. But the wall she built around her heart, the one she believed would stand forever, now held cracks where light slipped through. They reached a shaded pathway lined with tall oaks. The stroller wheels rolled smoothly over the paved ground. Rebecca glanced sideways at George, who walked with his hands loosely at his sides, eyes fixed on the twins as if every blink mattered. She stopped walking. "George," she said softly. He looked up, instantly alert but cautious. "Yeah?" She took a slow breath, her fingers gently brushing the stroller handle. "Come walk beside me," she said. His eyebrows lifted slightly, not in surprise but in disbelief that she had spoken those words aloud. "Are you sure?" he asked, his tone almost fragile. Rebecca nodded. "Yes, I am." He moved quietly to her side, matching her pace. Their shoulders didn't touch, but the air between them felt different, warmer, lighter, like the first warm day after winter. For a moment they walked without speaking. Then she shifted her hand slightly, hesitating, not out of fear but out of meaning. Her fingertips brushed his forearm briefly. It wasn't an embrace. It wasn't a declaration. It was something softer, more honest, a gesture that carried the weight of every apology unspoken and every promise forming. George stopped breathing for a second. Rebecca didn't pull away. Instead, she let her hand rest there gently, anchoring them both to the present moment. George swallowed hard. "Rebecca," his voice cracked. "You don't know what that means to me." "I do," she whispered. The twins stirred in their stroller, tiny hands twitching as if reacting to the shift in energy. Rebecca looked down at them, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "We're not fixed," she said quietly. "We're not the same people we were, and I'm not pretending everything's solved." "I wouldn't want you to," he replied, voice steady. "I just want to keep proving myself. Not once, not twice, every day." She looked at him fully then, really looked, and saw not the man who betrayed her, but the man who fought through every painful consequence to become someone better. "Keep showing up," she said. "Keep being this version of yourself. For them, and for us, I will," he promised, not in a rushed tone, not in a desperate plea. He said it like a vow he had already begun fulfilling long before this moment. A nearby duck quacked loudly, startling all four of them. The babies flinched in their sleep. Rebecca let out a soft laugh, one that felt like sunshine breaking through clouds. George laughed too, shaking his head. "Guess even nature wants to join the conversation." Rebecca nudged his arm lightly. "Maybe it's a sign." "A sign of what?" he asked, half smiling. "That life is moving again," she replied, "and we're moving with it." They continued walking until they reached a small wooden bridge overlooking a still pond. The water shimmered under the light, reflecting the surrounding trees in soft ripples. Rebecca turned to him again. "George?" "Yeah?" She exhaled slowly, the kind of breath someone releases when letting go of something heavy. "I forgive you," she said. The words weren't rushed. They weren't forced. They came from a place she didn't think she would ever find again, a place where pain and love could coexist without overwhelming her. George froze. Tears filled his eyes instantly, not from guilt, but from pure gratitude. You forgive me," he whispered, voice breaking. "Yes," she said softly. "Not because I'm forgetting what happened, not because everything is perfect now." She looked down at the twins. "But because they deserve parents who aren't carrying bitterness, and because I deserve to be free of that weight too." He covered his mouth with his hand, overwhelmed. Rebecca stepped closer, close enough that their arms brushed naturally now, not hesitantly. "We'll rebuild slowly," she said, "brick by brick, step by step. And if we fall at any point, we'll catch ourselves with honesty, not silence." George nodded vigorously, wiping tears with the back of his hand. "I promise you, I won't forget what it took to get here." "I know," she said. They stood there for a long while, watching the pond, watching the wind move across the surface, watching the twins sleep peacefully in their stroller. Two tiny lives that pulled them back from the edge, two tiny lives that reminded them why love is worth fighting for. Rebecca reached for George's arm again, this time not tentative, but secure. He looked down at her hand resting gently in the crook of his elbow, then lifted his eyes to meet hers. They didn't kiss, they didn't rush, they didn't jump into declarations they weren't ready for. But they walked together, quietly, steadily, as a family moving toward a new beginning. Sometimes healing isn't about forgetting the pain, it's about choosing to rise above it. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight, and love doesn't return through grand gestures. It grows through consistency, humility, and honest effort. And when two people decide to rebuild instead of walk away, they discover that second chances aren't about starting over, but about starting wiser. If this story touched your heart today, please take a moment to like this video. It helps YouTube share it with more people who may need this message. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Graham Stories for more heartfelt stories filled with life lessons, growth, and hope.